Hey everybody, this is Tao at the Forge, and I'm back. So after a long period of time, I've been doing renovations. We actually built a theater in my basement and kind of upended my whole house. I finally kind of got things into a place where I can start actually making videos again. So first of all, I just want to say thanks to all the subscribers out there who have stuck with me. I actually was expecting my subscriber count to just tank, but it didn't, and I want to say thank you to the community for still sticking with me, even though I haven't made content in a while. Right, so hopefully I'll be able to get back into making the videos, and we'll see where it takes us. So today, though, I wanted to talk about Magic the Gathering and a new product that came out a few weeks ago called KeyForge. So KeyForge is made by Richard Garfield, who's also the creator of Magic the Gathering, and a lot of people are saying that KeyForge is going to take over Magic the Gathering, or at least is a good competitor for it, and I wanted to talk about it. So even though I've been busy and not making any videos or anything like that, I've still been kind of playing Magic a bit, and although not really online, I've been kind of doing the best I can with the busy life that I have. So I was looking at KeyForge, though, and it kind of got me interested to say, like, is Magic actually going to die? Like, is KeyForge going to take things over, or is it going to really bite into that market? And I have some thoughts on that. So my first thought is that yes, the KeyForge will bite into the Magic the Gathering market a bit, but not in the way that people might expect. And what I mean by that is that I think that KeyForge is going to hurt Magic the Gathering in the realm of new players. So Magic, I don't think we'll see any pain or any dip in their sales in the immediate time, because currently KeyForge is so new. But I think a lot of new players, when they're deciding whether or not they want to play, a lot of new players are going to go to KeyForge instead of Magic. And that kind of makes me sad a little bit, to be honest. I like KeyForge is an interesting game, and I don't want to say anything bad about it because it's actually a pretty cool game. But the reason why is because it's just way cheaper to get into it, right? And it's easier to learn the rules of it. It's like it's a simplified version, right, of Magic the Gathering, right? Where like you could play something super simple, and then there's the super low level trading card games. And you have Magic the Gathering, and KeyForge comes somewhere in the middle of that. And so I think that KeyForge is going to appeal to a lot of new players. And so Wizards, I think, will see, like, over time, a little bit of a decline in new players entering into the game. And that's a little bit worrying. Here's why it's worrying, right? Because every time, like all the time, you have people leaving the game for whatever reason. Like, look at me, for instance. I had to kind of stop making videos in the last little while because I was renovating, right? But sometimes people get married, they have kids, they fall into poverty, or whatever, right? There's a lot of, they just lose interest, they go to university, for a ton of reasons. People just stop playing Magic. But in order for the game to thrive, you have to have new players coming in all the time. And if you don't have new players, then the player base is going to shrink. And I think we've seen a little bit of that with Magic the Gathering, right? So the key is that you got to get people into the game early, right? So like, for instance, I love things like Transformers, right? But, well, why do I like Transformers? Well, because I played with them when I was a kid, right? McDonald's has this kind of locked down because, like, they give away Happy Meals with a toy or a book, and, like, they got everything catered around children. And the reason why is because when you make something super friendly for children, they get into it, and then when they grow up to become adults, they get their kids into it, right? Same thing with Magic the Gathering. So you have to be able to get people into it early. It's rare that you're going to have someone who's like 50 years old suddenly start playing Magic the Gathering, right? If you're more often going to get someone who's 15 years old, and they're going to get into it, and they might stop playing for a while. Let's say they go to college or whatever, but later on, they might get back into it. And that's the key demographic I think that Wizards has got to focus on. And that's the key demographic that KeyForge also, I think, will bite into, right? So, like, if you take a look at a KeyForge deck, right, you come like a little deck like this with 37 cards. Each one is unique, right? And there's some ups and downs. I'm going to talk about those. But this deck, I live in Canada, so trading cards actually cost a little more because we're getting what's it called? Trump's levies on it, right? It's not a levy, I forget the word, but we're getting extra duties and customs on it. But these cost about $12 to $13 each in Canada. I know in the US, I think the MSRP is about $10. Right? That's the same thing as, it's not even, actually, it's cheaper than a starter deck from Magic the Gathering, like one of those, not the Welcome deck, but the Planeswalker decks, right? And the thing with one of these is that they're unique, right? And you can play, basically you can play it, and it's almost like a modern deck where you just can't, you just play it eternally, right? So, I mean, that's actually pretty cool, right? So, anyways, I think that's why it's going to appeal to the younger audience. So I wanted to do some comparisons between Magic the Gathering and KeyForge and talk about my thoughts, because there are some pros and cons in different areas. So the first one is in the price. All right, so in the price for sure, KeyForge is like hands down the best. All right, so like for instance, I'll show you this here. Okay, I was able to put together a battle box of KeyForge decks. All right, so we got the basic game stuff here, right? I have all the dividers. Each one of these is a separate KeyForge deck, right? That altogether costs less than a playset of Scalding Tarns, right? So, I mean, and they're all, you know, there's like more than, I think there's like 20 decks in there or something like that, you know, so like that altogether costs less than 4 cards, which is like really hard. You know, that's really harsh. By far, KeyForge is way cheaper to play. You know, so that's one of the big things is for new players, right? Now, of course, the second thing is gameplay, right? So, what's the gameplay like? Well, I would say they're about tied, right? With maybe Magic slightly ahead, because Magic is just a little more complicated, and I like more complicated games. So, you know, like KeyForge has a different mechanics to it. They don't have mana. You know, I think overall, like the gameplay is about the same, but I would say a little more interactive on the Magic the Gathering side. And so I would give it to Magic the Gathering, but only slightly, right? The balance. Okay, now in balance is where KeyForge has it down as well, right? So when you so here's 2 different decks. All right, so they are both still in their packs. This one is JIC Bottle of the Talented Forum. The other one is Gearkuel, the editor of the station. All right, both of these, okay, cost about well, $13. So it's like $26 for both of these, and you can play them and you can't modify them. And it's pretty much balanced out that way, right? Like the only problem is that if you do get a deck that isn't balanced, there's no way to modify it, right? So some decks just naturally are going to be stronger than others. Like for instance, I have one of my decks has like I think 1 or 2 4-ofs or 3-ofs, right? It just makes the consistency a lot better. I'll talk about consistency more in a minute, but for the game balance, I think overall, because you can't just modify your deck, the game is just naturally a little more balanced, you know, because of the randomness. Magic the Gathering can be balanced, but for a price, right? So the thing is, with Magic the Gathering, a lot of times it's pay to win. Now, I don't want to, you know, don't shout at me in the comments and say like, oh, Magic's not pay to win. It kind of is, right? That you can get some budget decks and stuff like that, but there's a reason why the top performing decks are always more expensive, right? Because the cards in them just cost more, and if you can't afford those cards, then you got to play with strictly worse versions, and you know you're not going to be able to win, right? Like not as consistently, especially if you consider like a format like Modern or something like that. Yeah, I can play with like Guild Gates, right? But you know, if I play with like Scalding Tarn, like fetch lands, my deck is just gonna be better. Okay, so that brings us to consistency. So with consistency, Basically, what I mean is how well can your deck do what it wants to do all the time. Now, hands down, Magic the Gathering. All right, hands down. The reason why is because when you have a procedurally generated deck, or when you consider it to be like semi-random, essentially, like, you can't guarantee that things are going to happen. Like, you're going to get the cards that you want. Like, for instance, I got a card called Help from Future Self in KeyForge, and it says that you can look in your hand and basically tutor up like a time traveler card. And then I was thinking, like, God, I hope I got a time traveler, right? Like, I think overall, I suspect that when it's procedurally generated, that if you do get the Help from Future Self card, that you will get a time traveler in your deck as well. But there's other cards, for instance, like, where you have like a fairy that gives you 2 amber or whatever when you come into the battlefield. Well, if you got like 3 or 4 of those, that actually helps quite a bit. Rather than if you just have like a 1 of this and a 1 of that, right? So Magic the Gathering, hands down, way more consistent gameplay, right? It seems like some decks in KeyForge are just better than others in that respect, in that they just, like, their cards are more aligned with what they're trying to do. So, I mean, overall, though, that's just that could be part of the allure of the game, but Magic the Gathering, hands down, way more consistent. All right. Barrier to entry. Now, this is something, it's kind of like a mix of everything. It's like the cost, the ease of play, the allure of the game, and stuff like that. I'd say KeyForge is slightly better than Magic the Gathering. All right. Mainly because it's a way cheaper cost and the rules are way easier to learn, right? With Magic the Gathering, for a similar cost, you could get into like a Planeswalker deck or something like that. But the problem is, a Planeswalker deck is a crappy barrier to enter, or a crappy way to ramp into Standard, because all the cards there are strictly worse, right? So it's kind of terrible. The best way to get into Standard, I think, probably is just a draft, right? Like, but then you're paying more cost. You're less likely to win, especially at first, because you don't know how to play. So you're probably just drafting for value. It's not, well, it can be okay. But overall, like, it's harder to get into Magic the Gathering. The community-wise is fine. Like, there's probably almost certainly a much larger community of Magic the Gathering, but it just depends too. If, like, most of the time, like, at every LGS in my city that I visited, everyone is super nice, right? Like, everyone's like really welcoming, and I'm sure there's assholes everywhere, but not really at any of the places where I've gone. But it depends. Like, if you've got a bad LGS, it's going to be really hard as well. But overall, the community in Magic the Gathering is stronger. But that being said, like, it's going to be very hard for you to sit down with like a Magic the Gathering deck and just figure it out. Or, for instance, like, just make a deck on your own if you've never played before, if you don't have a ton of experience or someone to help you. Whereas KeyForge, like, there is no deck building, so you can just get into the game pretty easily. So I'd say barrier to entry, KeyForge has got it. Overall fun. I would say it's close to a tie. They're both pretty fun to play. I'm not going to say either one sucks. I like actually both games. I would say Magic is probably more fun, slightly, because it's more interactive, right? And what I mean by that is that, like, because you can control what you're building in your deck, you can make the deck kind of interactive, and especially at the lower levels, like the tier 2, tier 3 type decks. Tier 1 decks tend to be kind of solitaire games where you're just like racing your opponent, especially in Modern. Where you're just racing your opponent to see if you can get the combo off, or get your massive creature out or whatever. Those are not, I don't think, nearly as fun. Like something like, for instance, Mill. Like, you can think of Mill as kind of a solitaire deck, but Mill's kind of my favorite. It's not really a solitaire deck. You are still interacting with your opponent. You're just, but you're still racing. There's not really like, I have to attack your creatures, or I have to disrupt your mana or something like that. It's just like, what can I do to kind of stop you from doing what you're doing so you can't kill me as fast? So I don't know. It's not nearly as interactive. So I would say overall, like, the fun part, still, I think, in Magic the Gathering's favor, but again, only very slightly. Okay, with deck archetypes, I would say for sure, for sure, very strongly, Magic the Gathering has it down. There's only a few different deck archetypes in KeyForge, and that could be a result of it being so new, right? There's only like one edition, the Call of the Archons, I think it's called. Yeah, I mean, there's not really that many different deck archetypes. They have like a number of different houses, but I think over time, I suspect they'll introduce different houses and the archetypes will grow. That'd be kind of neat to see. Whereas in Magic the Gathering, you got like a ton of different deck types, like at least like 30 to 50 different decks in Modern, right, that are competitive right now. So I would say that, overall, the deck archetypes are definitely in Magic the Gathering's favor. If you want to play different kinds of decks, there's a million different kinds of decks to play, with Magic. KeyForge has a few, but not nearly as many. Okay, replaceability. Now, here's one thing that is concerning, that if you're playing KeyForge and you lose a card, like let's say your little brother takes it to show his friends and loses the card or something like that, or even shadier is you're playing at a table and someone's like shuffling your cards or whatever, and they just drop one on the floor, or they just put it in their lap or something like that. Well, pending the result of the game, it doesn't actually matter, like if you win or lose, but afterwards you can't play with that deck anymore because it's not legal. Now, here's the thing: if I lose one of my cards, like let's say, like a really common card I found is like a bad penny, it's called. You can't actually replace it, right? Like it's in a ton of different decks, but you can't get a bad penny from like another deck and put it into your deck, right? Because it belongs to a different deck. So that deck that you have is just toast, right? So, I mean, that could be really awful. Like if you lost a single card, you lost your whole deck and you can't replace it, right? Because every deck is unique. So, oh man, that could be really painful. Like if you got a deck that you really like playing, you've played it with it for a long time, you've learned all about it, and everything, and then you suddenly like lost that card. Oh man, I'd probably lose my mind, right? So, whereas in Magic, for instance, I've had like a case where someone unfortunately picked up like a Cavern of Souls of mine, right? Like I think they destroyed it or something like that. I don't know what happened, but they picked up a Cavern of Souls. That sucks a lot, all right? But the thing is, like, I was able to then still replace it, right? Or I can put in like an island or something like that for it, and so I don't have to really worry about it, besides losing the card, but my whole deck isn't solely screwed. So that's one of the major issues I have with KeyForge, is that your deck is really fragile, like physically. Right? If anything happens to even a single card, then then it's done. Learning the rules. Okay, so KeyForge, definitely easy to learn the rules. The rule book is not really that hard. They have good online support, and there's not that many keywords. Whereas Magic the Gathering has like a ton of different rules, and people who have played for years and years and years still don't understand the rules. Even I don't understand all the rules. Like there's some weird ones, like what happens when a Death Toucher hits an indestructible creature, right? Like, do they kill them or do they not get destroyed? They don't get destroyed, by the way. But there's all sorts of weird things, the way things resolve, and putting stuff on the stack, and it's just, there's some really strange things, and some things that you would think that you shouldn't be able to do, like Gifts Ungiven. Gifts Ungiven, for those of you guys that don't know, Gifts Ungiven is a Magic card that allows you, or tells you that you have to tell your opponent or you have to search for your card for, I think, 4 different cards with different names, and your opponent can choose to put 2 of them in your graveyard and the other 2 in your hand, right? But when you search, you find 2 cards, the 2 cards that you want, usually an Unburial Rites and something huge like an Emrakul, and then you just say, oh, I couldn't find the other 2 cards, even though like your opponent knows damn well that you do have 2 other cards in your library, but you just say you can't find them, right? And they can't look there, so right? That seems like, to every new player that I've shown that combo to, that play to, they always think it's total crap, right? They're like, as if, like, no way, that's so dirty, right? But apparently that's a legit play, so like the Magic the Gathering rules are very complicated. It's hard. Like the basic rules are easy, but like But once you start learning about all the different keywords and how they all interact with each other, it can actually get quite intimidating, and there's actually quite a lot to it. So definitely KeyForge, ease of learning the rules is definitely like has the advantage. So overall, I would say that Magic the Gathering overall is still the better game, right? I played both. I haven't played KeyForge that much. I played a few matches. I'd say Magic is probably the better game overall. I like being able to brew with it. Like, I'm a brewer. Like, I actually like brewing decks more than I like playing the decks. So I'd say that overall Magic the Gathering appeals to people like me more because of that. KeyForge, I think, is easier for newer players to learn. It's easier to get into and cheaper overall. But I think overall Magic just is a more immersive, more strategic, consistent sort of experience, like when you're getting into it, right? So overall, though, like, they're both great games, and I would encourage people to try it out. But Magic, I think, is overall still the better game. Just for recommendations, is that people who are Timmies, right? Like, Timmies are really going to enjoy KeyForge. What a Timmy is an archetype of player, the kind of player who likes to get big creatures out and who likes to do like combos and stuff like that. To that extent, Johnnies as well, the combo players. Johnnies will actually enjoy KeyForge quite a bit as well. And of course they might like Magic the Gathering as well, right? Like, so people who like to play big creatures and people who like to play the combos. Those are both going to enjoy both games. The one group that's not going to enjoy KeyForge is the spikes. Now, spikes are the people who really just like to win, right? Like, they're the people who are who are playing what some people might call like a degenerate deck, the solitaire players that just like try and get like turn two wins and stuff like that. Not all spikes are like that, right? But they really just want to win. That's how they enjoy the game, right? If you are like that, you're probably not going to enjoy KeyForge, because you can't really do anything to change like how you win, except maybe go and buy like a really expensive deck, right? Like, so there could be like a deck that's just more consistent overall, and you just go and pay a lot of money for the whole deck. But overall, it's going to be hard for you to do that in KeyForge rather than Magic the Gathering. In Magic the Gathering, you can go and look online and net deck and find like the best deck and or a really, really powerful deck, and just buy that deck and just win all the time, right? So overall, if you're a spike, like, everyone's all three of these, but if you are a spike and you really like to win all the time and that's your game, probably KeyForge isn't the right place for you. If you really like to brew, KeyForge also not the right place for you. If you just like to play like a casual game that's pretty fun and balanced, and like doesn't require like weeks and weeks of research, then KeyForge is the game for you. So anyways, that's my thoughts on Magic the Gathering and KeyForge. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like, have you tried KeyForge? Like, what do you think are the major differences? What do you think the best part of each one is? What do you think the worst is? Right? Do you hate one, like, or not? Unfortunately, we had Purple, like MTG Purple, leave the Magic the Gathering community basically for KeyForge. I think that was kind of a mistake, but that's like, he's got to do whatever he likes to do, right? So if that brings him happiness, then then Perp, I'm sad to see you leave the community, but I'm glad that you're happy. Yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear, is it worth it to get into KeyForge or not? And are you going to try it? All right, well, that's it for now. Try and make some more videos. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.